Okay, and it looks like we are live. Let me quit out of my Chrome browser and go full screen here. All right, here we go, everyone. Actually, I'm not going to go full screen. I'll toggle to my Word document. All right, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the National Healthy Masculinity Conversation Series. This is Conversation 9, where we're going to be talking about healthy masculinity and bystander intervention as a way of life. I'm joined here by my colleagues Kevin Webb, Eugene Kang, Charlotte Sheffield, and Aaron Hill, and I'll let them introduce themselves in just a minute. My name is Jeremy Hardy. I'm a training and technical assistance manager for Men Can Stop Rape. And this conversation is brought to you by Men Can Stop Rape and also co-sponsored by our smartphone technology and website, University Assault Services Knowledge, or UASK for short. If you're interested in learning more about that, there's a website and link available in the comments or description below the video. So with that, I just want to pass it off to you all to introduce yourselves. So, Eugene, can you start us off and then popcorn to our colleagues?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Eugene Kang. I use she, hers pronouns, and I am the coordinator for alcohol and other drug initiatives at American University. I will pass to Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Webb. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the Title IX training manager at Howard University. And I'm going to popcorn to Charlotte.
Hi all. My name is Charlotte Sheffield. I use she, her pronouns, and I am assistant coordinator on the prevention team at the Care to Stop Violence office at the University of Maryland College Park. And I will pass over to Erin.
Hi everyone, my name is Erin Hill, pronouns she, her, hers, and I work at Georgetown University. I'm the interpersonal violence training and education specialist. It's great to be here with everybody, and I'll pass it back to Jeremy.
Thank you all. So here's what I'm thinking. So, really with this conversation, as we've talked about before, we would love to really just role model a little bit some of the forward thinking and conversations that college campuses are navigating here. And as we have been talking and preparing, bystander intervention became a larger theme, and I think we're going to get into that on a micro and macro level as well. But really, we're just hoping to really role model the conversation for everyone. We're hoping that this can be a chance to, brainstorm and just kind of pass the ball back and forth a little bit, and really just position your all's expertise, as our colleagues, especially in the DC area, to talk about, what are we doing for the fall, and how are we transitioning on the programming, the work that you do to meet some of those needs and the ways that our need to adjust is present right now. So with that, I'm thinking, why don't we start off with some positive stuff? So, with the fall coming soon, yeah, I know, right? Let's start with some positives. We were just talking about pets. So with the fall coming so soon, what are you all feeling good about? What are some of the things that you are looking forward to that you feel are strengths that we can tap into and lift up, and kind of, let's start with that. So I saw some nodding and I saw some thinking. Kevin, I saw you nodding first. Can I toss to you first?
Sure. So, I think one of the opportunities I see is, I was kind of looking for the silver lining amidst the whole quarantine that we've been in since our campus closed down in March. And I think the ability to use, electronic means, like to meet virtually, I think opens up some opportunities in terms of, the kinds of education and awareness events that we'd like to do around prevention, around bystander intervention, and other topics related to that. And I think that there's maybe a more of an opportunity to get people's attention because people are already engaged mainly online in terms of school and all things related to their campus. It's easier to reach people. It's easier maybe to bring in guest speakers because they don't have to travel. It's easier maybe to have a forum or to try new things. I think we've talked as a group about some of our experiences with, events, and, you can try some new things because, the cost is kind of low, right? If you if you set up a virtual forum and you want to see how it works and whether there'll be interest and only 3 people show up, you haven't, rented a room on campus or space on campus and ordered food. You've just set up the Zoom call, right? And so now you can say, okay, maybe that wasn't the right thing. What might people be interested in? You could get people together in a focus group, which is something I know you do a lot of, Jeremy. I mean, I think in some ways it makes it easier to reach people because people are engaged with the technology on Zoom or whatever. And maybe also more engaged because there's less other activity going on that they would normally be engaged in. So I see an opportunity there. So that's something that we're really going to try to take advantage of and really try to reach people. And because students are already indicating that they're interested in having these conversations around bystander intervention and other things like consent and other things related to that.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Can we pass to somebody else?
Jeremy, I can answer. So one thing that has been giving me hope and a lot of joy actually is seeing the ways that people have been engaging in a lot of really authentic, vulnerable conversations around these topics. And I'm seeing a lot of creativity and innovation really from the ways that our students and our community are doing it, whether it's learning on TikTok or creating, these graphics on Instagram that are really about racial equity, about bystander intervention, about the way substances are connected to social justice issues. I'm highly impressed. So I think that while there's so many challenges with this global pandemic, I've also seen many people rise to the occasion. And that doesn't mean that it's not challenging, but it does also mean that there's been a lot of really powerful creativity that I've been seeing from people, and that's given me a lot of hope.
Yeah, I really love that. Thanks for pointing all that out. Erin, you want to go next?
Sure. I was just going to echo Kevin and Eugen, because I was just going to talk about this creativity piece, right? And sort of folks being provided the space and the flexibility to now be creative, right? And I think it's really interesting when we're thinking about this, because when we want to meet the moment where it is in terms of bystander intervention curriculum, the good news is that this is making all of us take an internal look at our own trainings and curriculums, right? What are the gaps that have already existed in this curriculum that are not new now, but are now highlighted in a lot of ways? So it's really kind of empowering a lot of folks, prevention folks in particular, to say, what is it that we've been educating people on? How has that not been working? And then how can we meet the need that's always been there, but given this new creative license that we have in different ways? And so that's kind of what I would say is the silver lining, as I think Kevin had mentioned earlier, is this idea of, taking a moment for some real introspection and seeing kind of where we are, and then taking that creativity that Eugen was talking about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Charlotte, can we pass to you?
Sure. Definitely agree with everything that's been stated. I've personally been really excited about seeing so much student activism this summer and towards the end of last semester, even though we were in this virtual setting. The organizing that has been happening specific to UMD, but just all over the country, has been really inspiring to see student leaders stepping into these conversations. I think a lot of the messaging that has been around the global health pandemic with COVID has been related to a lot of the topics that we talk about. For example, building community, taking steps to not necessarily protect yourself, but to protect other people, looking out for each other. And that's all really tied to bystander intervention, thinking about the root of our behaviors and just caring for another person, part of healthy relationships and part of consent. And then also what Erin started talking about, the racial equity movements that are happening right now, also so very much tied to recognizing harm and bystander intervention and just general anti-oppression work. So I think that all of these things, all of these conversations that are happening right now are really great starting points and middle points for continuing these conversations in the fall with our students who are already having these things, thinking about these things. So that's really exciting to me.
I mean, that's just wonderful insight. I love the starting points, the midway points, as entree for some of these conversations. And we're talking about these conversations. I'm hearing a lot about, how it connects to the public health moment, how it connects to the social justice moment. And so it's making me think, as we talk about bystander intervention, because I agree with you all, there's so much opportunity that's in front of us. And there's a lot of ways, Aaron, to your point, that the gaps that did exist now have an opportunity to be filled, maybe more creatively or differently in a creative way than we did before. And I know that we see that in our work at Men Can Stop Rape, especially using healthy masculinity to engage boys and men in primary prevention, to have conversations about masculinity in general. And so I really feel like there's an expanse here. There's a broad range of what the umbrella of bystander intervention is. So maybe it would help ground us a little bit to maybe as a group kind of talk about, what are some of the traditional ways that people talk about, or that we as, colleagues who work with college campuses and college students talk about bystander intervention. And then we can use that as, entree into some of the, broader pieces of what it is that I think that we're naming here. So who wants to jump into that first? I see you nodding, Eugene.
Sure, I'm happy to. I'm nodding so vehemently because the minute you say that, I think about my training in bystander intervention. 3Ds, 3Ds. Anyone else? So the ways that we often talk about it, especially in a higher education setting, would be, okay, equip yourself with 3Ds: direct, delegate, and distract. So the ways that, I, as a student and also, within the field, have been kind of trained to talk about it is in kind of situation-based scenarios. So, oh, you're at a party, you're somewhere, you see this, and it's often talked about in this like one-time way. Like you see this one thing, and then you do one of these 3 actions, and then you should be good. So, direct being you directly intervene, whether that's like going up to the person, or if this is in an online setting, like directly commenting to the person. Distract, what it sounds like, doing something to kind of remove the tension of the situation, and then delegate, getting someone to help you.
Thank you. Others want to add? Is there something else that you feel like is part of some of the traditional ways that we talk about bystander? I always thought that was a really accurate synopsis, Eugene. But others? Yeah, Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I'm trying to think of the ways that I was trained too, and even in the work that I do now. And it's interesting because one thing that I've noticed that we don't really talk about traditionally is bystander intervention with someone that you know and someone that you love doing harmful behavior, right? In terms of when we're discussing about sexual violence, when we're talking about interpersonal violence, I feel as if we tell people the myth about a stranger coming in and committing violence. That's a myth, right? But then we don't actually then talk about, well, if it's not strangers that are doing harm, then who are the people that are doing harm, right? And that's people within our own communities, people that we may know, that we may like, that we may love. And so shifting this narrative to not these scenarios that are like, if you were in this place and you saw this person coming doing this. Instead, we need to shift it to, how do you raise your own awareness of the harmful behavior that you yourself may be instigating, as well as the behaviors of those near you? And that type of intervention, first of all, feels very different. And number two, the other thing that I think is a narrative around bystander intervention is this like hero complex, right? I mean, on the news, if someone intervenes, it's like, this is amazing, and this person, feels really great. That's actually not really what happens, right? Sometimes bystander intervention and intervening against somebody that has done something poor that you may respect, even in some small way, is gonna feel different. And so I think we, in this moment, can hopefully empower us to discuss those pieces as well, to help people process and empower them in different ways.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I feel like you've captured, some of the, like where Eugene was talking about the situation dependent scenarios that are often in some of the bystander intervention trainings. There are ways that it is a little situation dependent to some degree. And to what you're pointing out, Aaron, I feel like there's also maybe there's, an absence of, or we need more opportunity for the opportunity to see how this bystander intervention skill, this mindset that we're talking about, shows up in the social norms that you interact with, shows up in your friend groups, in your family origin, in the community or communities that you are a part of. Kevin, Charlotte, did you want to jump in here?
So, and related to what Aaron was saying about how, looking at your own behaviors and sort of how the things we say or do, impact others. I was thinking about how, and it's kind of related to the first question you asked as well, how I think a lot of what we're seeing in terms of this mass movement for social justice now is sparked, by the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but particularly with the killing of George Floyd, that this was something that we've seen things like it before. I mean, we saw Eric Garner, similar scenario, right? But I think there's this moment where everybody was quarantined and maybe not distracted with a lot of other things as we normally would have been, because the cycle usually goes, we see something, we're outraged, it's bad, maybe there's some protests, and then we kind of go back to our normal routine. And that didn't happen this time because we really didn't have a normal routine to go back to. So I think it also presents an opportunity for us to notice other things that are happening. So, and I think of, just this weekend, I showed my kids the video of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez give her speech on the floor of Congress about the incident with Congressman Ted Yoho. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Did I get that right? Yeah. Where, she was, walking up the steps of the Capitol building, passed by, and some words were exchanged. He had said something to her, "You're disgusting," and then he called her an effing B, right? And so she gave a very eloquent, speech about how, as a woman, she's been subjected to this many times, and that, and you can look up the speech. It was great, but I remember my first thought was, well, I need to show that to my daughter. And then my second thought was, no, I need to show that to my daughter and my son. And I think it's one of those things that I think that because we are maybe focused on news or other things that are coming across our social media feeds more, we can take the opportunity to notice, again, things in our maybe personal environment, but also the things that are coming across our feeds or they're popping up on our screens in a different way, and take them or seize them as opportunities for discussion. I mean, I think that whole incident could be a really interesting, jumping off point for a discussion around several things, but including bystander intervention, right? And it kind of relates to examples that we often talk about with regard to bystander intervention, right? Like, what do you do when you hear someone using misogynistic or violent or harmful language, right? And Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talked about how Yoho was walking with another congressman. And she didn't go so far as to say this, but the implication was that I think she said he was walking arm in arm with him or something. And apparently he didn't say anything, right? That was the kind of the implication, right? So I just think that, we sort of are bombarded with a lot of things, through social media, through the news, and we're in a place where maybe we have more occasion maybe to be consuming more of this. And some people advise us that maybe we shouldn't consume as much, and there's something to that as well. But I think if we take the opportunity to notice some of these things and maybe see some of these real life scenarios and as an opportunity for discussions that maybe we can apply to our own context, whether it's our campus context, our work context, and sort of use as a jumping off point for discussions around bystander intervention. That probably did not answer your question at all, but it was what I thought of. It was what Aaron made me think of.
Well, even better, Kevin, is that it brought up even more questions, I think. And I mean, there's just so much in both the things that you mentioned with, the social justice movement in response to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and, the sort of different opportunity there was with everybody in quarantine to say, no, we're not going to stand by and take this. And also with the video of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, being able to use that kind of a thing, it just happened, as a teachable moment, or as, content as a prompt for conversation with students. And to what you were saying earlier, and to Aaron's point earlier about the creativity, how it's sort of like, yeah, the 3Ds are really important still, and create a simple strategy for intervention. And yet there's, questions for our work at Men Can Stop Rape with Engaging Men. What are the messages around, the other congressman who was standing by? What messages did that person receive as a boy, as a young adult, and as adult, that has shaped the way that he shows up in that environment? It's, I would imagine that it's a little different to intervene on, saying, some harm that you witness, on the quad on campus than, in the halls of Congress, right? And so playing into the environment and being mindful of how that, influences the decisions that you can make, and that you are empowered to make. Like there's, my point is that there's so much in what you just said, Kevin, that there's really like more to unpack there. Charlotte, I wanted to pass to you. I see you a lot of nodding, and I just wanted to, give you a chance to jump in here too. Oh,
sorry. Just agreeing, nodding in agreement. Like Aaron and Kevin were saying, I think that right now is a really crucial moment to make sure that our messages and our trainings reflect the lived experiences of students right now, and reflect what the situations that they're going to be a part of, where they could use bystander intervention, and whether that be in virtual settings with their close communities, with their friends, in a classroom with a professor, or whether that be in connection to the social justice movements that are happening right now, and a lot of conversations regarding that. I think that making sure that that's seen in these trainings and not really glossed over as it may have been in prior times, and not all times, but sometimes those conversations have been glossed over. I know that a lot of bystander intervention trainings use those situational dependent examples, such as, if you see someone where someone's really in danger, call 911 or call the police. And oftentimes that's couched with, if you feel comfortable doing so. So not just saying that small additive, if you feel comfortable doing so, but really unpacking that. I think that that's what this moment calls for, in addition to other conversations, but that's just one example of how we can allow space for different perspectives, experiences, relationships to each other and to systems to show up in our bystander intervention trainings, and make themselves present.
Yeah, and I feel like, Charlotte, you've really nicely transitioned us into, thinking about some of the challenges that are in front of you, what some of the things that you all are going to have to pay extra attention to, in thinking about, like, yes, we've got the opportunity in front of us, for a lot of different reasons, and yet now the work needs to be done, right? So taking advantage of the opportunity is also the follow-up step, the full swing of what we can do next. And so I'm wondering if we can transition into some of that too, talking about where you all feel like there are challenges that you're thinking through and working through, and to any degree of like, we're not sure if we got the answer yet, or this is the thing that I'd love to talk about here. What are some of the things that we would like to just hash out in our conversation here?
So I'll say the flip side of what I said initially about the seizing the opportunity of engaging people, because students are already engaged online, and maybe being easier to reach a large number of people in one fell swoop, like with a Zoom sort of conference or activity. The flip side of that is that maybe if students are largely not on campus, because campuses have a mix of plans, that maybe some students feel less engaged with what's going on, at their school, right, on campus, because they're not physically on campus. How do you, and this is just even from a broader sort of orientation standpoint, right, as we talk about what kind of campus culture we want to have and how you contribute to that through things like bystander intervention. If you have, say, first year students who are starting at the school, but they're not actually physically on campus, I don't know, maybe there's some challenges with helping them to feel connected to the campus in the first place, right? So that's the challenge, or one of the challenges, right, is how do you just engage people and make them feel a part of the campus community, again, when they maybe have not met in person or have not had a chance to, experience the campus, and then engage them in these conversations around what kind of culture we want to create on campus and how we want to treat each other and interact with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Aaron, Eugen, can I toss it to you now?
Sure. Jeremy and friends, a really popular term that I'm seeing come up in my social media and within higher ed is anti-racist, anti-racism. And hearing a lot of people wanting to integrate anti-racist lenses or equity-based lenses into their work. And I think that this is something that is integral to our work as prevention professionals and just, I think, human beings. And I think one of the challenges is thinking about what structurally that really means. And so, like, while you all were talking and bringing up so many good points, I was thinking about how, especially within bystander intervention work and just violence prevention work, so much of, and actually even anti-racism work, remembering that we need to center and uplift the voices of those who are affected the most, right? So people of color, communities of color, survivors. And how do we do that without also then burdening and re-traumatizing folks in the system? Because many of our systems are not set up to integrate communities of care, right? So we'll bring students to our campus and say, okay, well, great, can you all create a campus of care? But what are we also doing structurally to make sure that that happens, right? So it's important that we don't use buzzwords and words that, that connote a certain feeling of belongingness and social justice without integrating true policies, reckoning really, okay, so you say you want a community of care on campus, what community do we have now? And be honest about it, right? So that's listening to the people who are on our campuses, that's listening to staff, that's listening to people who are the most marginalized. Do you talk with your custodial staff who are being asked to come onto our campus and clean, right? I'm noticing also there's a lot of passive voice being used when we're talking about, oh, our universities will be cleaned by, this will be happening. And we don't put a voice to who's actually doing that. And so I think that's really important when we think about violence prevention work, is in what ways do we incite or encourage certain forms of violence, even if it's not this physical kind of violence, but this long-term systemic violence in our communities.
Where's my clap emoji? I can't, where's my clap emoji? Yeah, yes to all of that. Yeah, Aaron, you want to jump in after that?
Yeah, no, so Eugen, I'm so glad that you brought this up because something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and this isn't to one particular university, but just I think universities in general, it's like they're telling people, okay, teach our students about equity, right? Teach our students about equity, teach our students about this, teach about bystander intervention, but the very systems that are requiring that are in and of itself, they are racist systems, right? Universities, campuses are absolutely have institutional racism, discrimination within the people that are there and within the structures that are there, right? So when we're thinking about bystander intervention, I feel like, to use Eugen's word, like the buzzword that we need to sort of avoid is we got to teach all these students about bystander intervention. We have to empower and just really make, but then how is that actually helping and affecting the power dynamics that exist within classrooms where like microaggressions happen daily for students, right? Like where is the bystander intervention education for faculty and staff? And I'm not talking about like an online thing that you click through, which can be very effective. Online education can be effective, but I I think in person or more nuanced is far, far more effective, right? So then to Eugen's point, it's like, we have to fix those institutions and those structures. And I'll also say another thing that I feel like at least university professionals that are front student-facing staff is a big challenge is resources, right? I mean, a huge issue with resources in terms of being funded, capacity, and also now in the pandemic, okay, if you want us to do programming, are you going to provide us with money to give students for better Wi-Fi connections, or to give students for a new cell phone or headphones or computer? So there's a lot of different obstacles here. And yeah, so I guess that's what I'd start with. There's a lot, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much, right? Like, I feel like what you were just talking about, Aaron, makes me think of, Men Can Stop Rape's approach to meeting people where they are, and that meeting people's needs is a way of doing primary prevention work, is a way of preventing forms of harm. And I like, what Eugen was talking about, because it really does expand. Like, when we talk about violence prevention, it's very easy to think of the most extreme or most obvious forms of that violence, which I think often takes the form of physical violence, or verbal, violence that is kind of like, like what we say, that it's not very likely that men will kick down a door and stop a rape, but it is more likely that you will hear some kind of a rape myth or rape joke that you have the opportunity to intervene on. I think the same thing applies when we're talking about race, that we have the opportunity to intervene on thinking that is conditioned by a white supremacist lens. And in the same way that, to Eugen's point about using language to look a certain way, right? One of the things that we talk about in our lens for talking about masculinity at Men Can Stop Rape, is the performance of that dominant story of masculinity, how it's a way of performing a certain kind of personality or in-group belonging that may not be authentic to who you are. And so, the reason to embark on healthy masculinity is for the benefit, the positive pro-social benefit to yourself, to your community, everybody on the social ecological model, not just to look like you're not a bad guy, or not just to look good for the sake of looking good, because that's trendy right now. We're looking for a more sustainable intervention on people's lives by offering that kind of lens. So everything that you both have said is making me think of all those things. And so, Charlotte, Kevin, do you want to jump in response to anything that Eugen or Aaron has just said?
Well, I keep thinking about a great presentation that you all do at Men Can Stop Rape, Our People, Connecting Anti-Rape and Anti-Racism Work, which I know when I was at Maryland, we brought it there a couple of times. And it seems like this is a moment for something like that, where you're talking about, creating this awareness, or more of an awareness, that these different forms of oppression are connected, and talking about the historical connection between the two, and examining, kind of what you're all talking about, this sort of, looking at, looking at things through an anti-racist lens, or dismantling systems that are oppressive, and applies to all these issues of, sexual assault, issues of racism, and those kinds of things. I think that sort of, because people are thinking about anti-racism, and that word anti-racism keeps coming up, so people are thinking about that, and I think maybe it's, that's just an example of a way in which we, or you, sort of help people to think about the connection between, that all these different forms of oppression are connected, and that, we can sort of, unite with people, who are fighting different battles, to sort of, because we're kind of fighting the same larger, battle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it made me think of that.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Kevin. Charlotte, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I agree with so much that has been shared. And I think that recognizing like our place as educators and preventionists within the structures is so important. And how we've been tied to them, and how we have been uplifting them and upholding them, historically, and recently. So really starting with that reflection of ourselves as messengers, as part of the system, and with our specific messages, and start with acknowledging the harm that our traditional bystander intervention practices have caused, and our different practices. So start with by acknowledging that our reliance on certain systems has upheld them and therefore contributed to further violence. And our lack of potentially addressing how biases play a role in what is even considered violence, who we identify as perpetrators of violence or more likely to be perpetrators, who we identify as people who experience violence, is all tied to ourselves as individuals through the lens of who we are. So I think that just starting by acknowledging that and then thinking about those questions of who are we centering in our conversations, who are we making room for their perspectives, what harm is centered, what harm is therefore decentered, and recognizing that the decentering of harm is more violence in our classrooms. And I think that just coming to terms with that and really grappling with that is a really important part of what we're doing right now in this field as educators and preventionists.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. And it really makes me think of, some of the ways that our role in doing primary prevention work, whether it be directly for violence prevention, sexual violence prevention, whether it be in the Title IX office, whether it be related to alcohol and substance abuse, that there is this real way that we have an opportunity also to, as you're pointing out, like what ways are we participating, or reinforcing the structure that is, and then also, so what ways are we able to offer some kind of alternative to it? And it really makes me think, with Charlotte, what you said made me think of kind of the response. I mean, sexual violence it harms communities as a whole, if we look at that in particular. And, on the survivor side of things, we really wanted to support and believe and provide some kind of healing and justice for survivors when they engage the university, to say, hey, this happened, right? And I also, think about, for our work with men, how we're wanting to also provide some kind of support system that says, hey, we're going to listen to what your side of this story and experience is, and what can we do to offer some kind of community healing, some kind of community support that allows people to grow, that allows people to still remain connected, even if we have to establish some new boundaries or some new norms. Because I really do think, what is the response to somebody who is deemed a perpetrator, or what is the response to somebody who does say something that's harmful? And Aaron, I'm thinking of the story that you shared on one of our previous calls. Can I ask you to share that story real quick? The young man in one of your trainings who had mentioned at the end, after being quiet. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, sure. I had no idea what you were talking about for a second, but sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. So this was a few years ago, and it was a bystander intervention training. And I can't remember exactly where it was, but I had a individual in my training identified as a male, cisgendered male, and he was pretty quiet throughout the whole training. And another, I think, challenge or obstacle that I'll just real quick pivot, if for prevention specialists, is it's really hard to see when we're doing our job well or not. That's a really, really hard thing to do, because if we're doing a great job, then we may actually see an increase in violence in different ways that's being reported or being stepped in on because people's awareness is heightened. But then we normally don't see it down the road how successful it's been, because culture change takes a long time. So anyways, let me pop out of that pivot and back here. So, during the training, I wasn't quite sure that this particular individual was sort of, that the training really was doing anything to them or to their psyche. And it's hard to know. But he raised his hand near the end and he said, you know what? I don't think that they're bad people necessarily, but I do think that my friends are doing this and they're talking this way, and I don't think they mean to be harmful, and I'm going to talk to them about it. And that was actually a really, really huge step, right? I mean, when we talk about bystander intervention, the reality of it is people don't go from like 0 to 60 miles an hour, right? I mean, there's a lot of growth that's happening in between there. And so for me, that was really impactful, that step. And for then him to take the power and privilege that he has within the communities that he's a part of to then intervene in a way that is going to be most effective given his knowledge and where he's coming from and how well he knows everyone is probably the most impactful opportunity of all. Hopefully that was a story I was.
Yes, that's
okay.
exactly what I was asking about. And I really like that story and the way that you just highlighted and pulled out some of like the really, you know, ongoing moving parts and layers to how we I think broadly think about bystander intervention. Because we don't just go from 0 to 60, and also it's ongoing. It's something, you know, we talk about our work with masculinity. It's from conception through the lifespan. You become a veteran Men of Strength Club member, our youth development programming. You don't graduate from it. And so there's this way that you as the trainer in that session, like you've just been talking about how bystander intervention is important and all the things that are the harm that we want to intervene on. You're raising the awareness. And that actually feels like the kind of qualitative data that lifts up and says, actually, this is working. Now this person has a new awareness of what the harm looks like, and they're challenged to think about, how do I now bring this new awareness where the change in the environment is me to my friend group, to the people who I think are good people, but maybe saying those things. And so it's another step in, now we can intervene differently. And so I'd be curious, you know, what is the kind of thing to say in a moment like that? You know, without asking what you did say, you know, what do you all feel like is the response? You know, what do you say to someone who asks a challenging and important question or offers an observation and statement like that? I'm gonna let you all. What do you all think?
So, Jeremy, the question is, what would we say to intervene in a situation?
In that moment, as a trainer working with a young person, their awareness has been raised. What do you then say to support that young person who says, I don't think my friends are bad people, but I know that they say these things? Now what? So Aaron, maybe I'll ask you to start, since it was your story.
Sure, let me get in touch with a few years younger Erin. I think that she said something along the lines of, you know, first of all, I think validation is really important. There's sort of a balance of, and it's different for every single individual, right? And it's different for me when folks are, you know, talking to me about intervention, right? So for me, it was validating that and said, you know, thank you so much for bringing that and for bringing that reflection. And I also offered to speak with the individual one-on-one afterwards as well, which I believe that I did. And that's another challenge with prevention trainings and groups, right? I mean, to have one message that's going to resonate the same with every single person in the room is just unrealistic. So for me, it's in those moments validating and supporting what the person has come to realize themselves, and then establishing some type of rapport moving forward with that person so that they can come to you and can talk more specifics. And I also always make sure that in any trainings that I do, I tell students, I'm here and I'm available. If you want to come debrief with me about a situation that you intervened on and it didn't go the way that you thought it would, or you could have done a better job, or you just want to come and cry about it, or you want to just come and debrief in general, to always make sure that the door is open. Because bystander intervention techniques, I mean, in my opinion, we are changing a mindset, right? We're not just training or empowering people or ourselves to just be able to do one situation at a time. That's not how I look at it. I look at it in terms of rewiring my brain in certain ways so that my awareness goes up and this becomes natural for me, that I don't have to think about it a whole lot. And that sometimes takes time. So to validate that process and make it sustainable, and to give the student resources so that they can find this sustainable for them moving forward, I think was helpful for me.
Yeah. all of that. And it really just, I want to pass it to our colleagues, but it really just makes me think of, how we talk about it, Men Can Stop Rape. It does take time, like you said, to change hearts and minds. And, that there's this way, I'm just noticing now, it's almost as if the, sustainable intervention, or one piece of the sustainable intervention, is the continued relationship building with that person, or with this community, with this group. That's an invitation for more conversation. It's sort of like that becomes some, the next step, or almost, does here. And I love that you just shared that you offer, yourself as a resource. Okay, yeah, we're talking here all in this room together for an hour, but also you can come to my office and see me if you have some questions or just want to chat. I love people too. I love to say hi. So let's see, can I pass it to our colleagues here? Do others want to follow up, to what Erin has just shared? Yeah, go ahead, Eugen.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for the reflection so far. I feel like I always learn from you all when I'm on a call with you, so thank you. And just thinking about relationship building, like what Erin is talking about, is so crucial. And I think finding a way to humanize bystander intervention as a way, right, as a set of values, as a way that I practice. And no one is perfect at something the first time they try. And I think it's like the similar way that you wouldn't expect yourself to master an art in a day. You won't do that with bystander intervention either. So I think also meeting people where they're at and like, well, what can you do? What do you feel challenged to do, is one thing. And then I was also thinking about what, again, like bringing a systems lens to our work. It's not just enough for us to be on this call and talk about bystander intervention and creating communities of care, right? So knowing that many of us are positioned in our workplaces to be that person. And sometimes we're the only person. So I really want to name that and honor that in the space, that it's not enough for just Erin, Kevin, Charlotte, Jeremy, Eugen to be the one person in the university, right? Because, we learn this in Men Can Stop Rape's trainings as well. When we teach, young men and boys, okay, well, this is a different way of being. This is a way that might be even truer to you. And we send them out in the world and the world says, nah, what do we do, right? So that's the same way in our universities and our communities at large. How are we bringing in communities of care so that when, your student Erin goes out there and tries to have those vulnerable conversations, there might be certain kinds of cultural norms in place where it's like, you know what, like, thanks for bringing that to my attention, versus you're overreacting, get out of my face. And these are real things that are taught. And it's not that, I think it's important that we make sure we don't hyper focus on individuals in our work.
Yeah. And just to what you said, Kevin, I know you're about to jump in. Just what you said, Eugen, too, it makes me think of some of our listeners, some of our audience who's with us today, for these questions that we're talking through. If you all have questions that you'd like us to just bounce around here before we wrap up at the hour mark, I would just invite you all to send them into the chat box or to tweet them at Men Can Stop Rape as well. So Kevin, were you about to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, going back to what Erin said about how, the particular student that she was talking about is not going to go from 0 to 60 right away, right? And extending him that grace that, and understanding that that's not going to happen for him. And also helping him to know and understand that his friends, the same applies for his friends, right? They're not going to go from 0 to 60, right? And so as he's exhibiting changed behaviors, or he is trying to influence his friend, or just really trying to try on some new ways of being or new behaviors for himself, that if it doesn't happen right away with his friends, or if there's pushback, or as you said, if the world is like, nah, to be able to be consistent and really find a way also that is, I want to say comfortable yet uncomfortable, right? So uncomfortable, that we want to make ourselves uncomfortable in that we're pushing against some maybe ways that we have been conditioned to being, that maybe we're not healthy, but also comfortable in the sense that we just each may have a different style of intervening, right? Just like you talked about the 3Ds, or even beyond that, right? And that may be influenced by whatever, our culture, our how we're socializing with our friends, but also could be the social context that we're in. And I think you sort of alluded to something along those lines, Eugen, about, determining what's the best way for, again, that student as an example, to intervene in the environment and in the social setting that he is in, what's going to be most effective in terms of being able to exert some positive influence. And it's not going to look the same for everyone or in every social setting or in every environment.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for all that, Kevin. Charlotte, I want to include you in here too. Did you have anything? Did you want to add something to this? Uh-oh, we lost Eugen.
Oh, oh no. But sure, I can add, hopefully Eugen comes back on. But I think what I'm hearing a lot of Kevin and what Eugen were speaking about is that we can still be in deep relationships and communities of care and call out and expect accountability in our communities. And I think that the way we frame accountability and the process of bystander intervention within our communities is really important when we're having and responding to our students, that we don't really enforce that good, bad binary, because that really distances and dehumanizes people from that experience, because people in their life who they love, who they care deeply about, are going to do harmful things. And we still want to encourage, really, in fact, more encourage those conversations with people that they have those deep relationships with. And I've been seeing a lot of people speak about accountability in a really great way lately, that it's an act of radical care, that it's an act of love, that it's an act of seeing someone's next best self and a community's next iteration, next best self. So it's really this process of internal and community growth together. And it's sort of the opposite of what detachment and sort of not recognizing harm and connections to systems that uphold whiteness has taught us. It's the opposite of that. So really embracing that process as a good thing is so important.
Yeah, and I just thank you again, Charlotte, for creating another opportunity for transition, because it really feels like, as we're talking about this theme of relationship building here, and especially what you said about accountability, on an individual or small group community sort of level, I'm wondering about the accountability that community partners have to the universities, that universities have to the community partners that they're in relationship with, tapping into the relationship building piece. I mean, what do you all feel like is a role that community partners can play in supporting college campuses, ways that, the resources that college campuses have can create that symbiotic relationship and reciprocate for community partners who are in support? Does somebody want to jump in first? Where do you all feel like community partners can play a role in all of this? I'm gonna pass to you, Eugen. You go first.
I knew it. I had my cursor on the unmute.
I know, I saw.
We're synced up. I was thinking about many different things. I think one thing is that to name that universities are a bubble, right? And many of the times, maybe our students aren't exposed to community organizations or even the community that their university is located in geographically. So I think one opportunity is to go from theory to practice with our students and with our staff members, right? So beyond just learning about it in the classroom, a lot of the times we outsource some of these issues, right? Oh, there's poverty over there, there's violence over there, there's issues over there. There's all of those things right here in our city. And I think the more that we can kind of lower that hierarchy in terms of university systems, particularly private, predominantly white institutions, being in communities that maybe are not, I think it's important to know that there are power dynamics there. So what are ways that we can build bridges so that we are not, doing any kind of volunteerism with our community orgs, that we're actually building authentic relationships with people, and I'm not just going here just to put this on my resume and then peace out. Right. So that's one thing, is that authentic relationship building that takes time, it takes humility, it takes learning about the community that you're in and investing. And then the second would be to bring in thought partners who can maybe challenge us to look at things a little bit differently. I think there are so many brilliant opportunities to work within campus partners And there's something special about bringing in someone who doesn't fully know all of the bureaucracy and all of the dynamics. Sometimes you can see clearer, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that would be two ways.
Thank you for that, Eugen. Aaron, do you want to go next?
How did you know? Yeah, no, I was just gonna echo what you said as well. You know, it's interesting, this idea of this campus bubble, because it's in our mind that it's a campus bubble, but it's absolutely part of the community, right? And it absolutely has an impact on the community in terms of financially, in terms of inequity. I mean, tons of stuff. And so something that I think about is that, so I came from community-based work prior to coming to the university systems. And I was actually kind of surprised by this sort of lack of bridges between the university and community. And, you know, maybe this is slightly unpopular to say, but I think that it's the truth when I say that all university professionals are not experts in everything, right? And it's okay to say that. And so to go to the community experts to help and to come in and to evaluate, to provide resources, I think it's just best practices. So that's how I think of it. It's not a choice of whether or not to work with communities. I don't think it should be a choice. I think it's absolutely required, because that's what the best practice is, and that's what the moment demands of us.
Yeah. Yes, all of that. Kevin, Charlotte?
So, you know, one of the things from the perspective of someone who works in a Title IX office is that we always want to make sure that students know that they're not forced into one option if they experience something, have a concern related to any kind of, you know, form of sexual misconduct, dating violence, stalking, any of those things that, you know, I think sometimes there's a perception that if I don't want to report to the Title IX office, then there's nothing else for me to do. Or if I don't want to talk to anyone at the university, then I have no other options, right? So we always make a point of trying to, for our part, we try to make sure people know that they even have several options within the university, right? So there are confidential resources, multiple confidential resources that do not and should not be reporting to us, right? There's our office, right? Then there's, you know, law enforcement, if someone wanted to engage with law enforcement, whether that's campus law enforcement or local law enforcement. But then I think also, you know, community partners, you know, provide another resource for students that we can offer and say, if you know, you have the option to seek help on campus, or you can seek help off campus. And I think also along with that, the more we engage with community partners on things related to education and awareness, and we form that relationship and they come to campus, you know, not just when there is a crisis or when a student is in crisis, but that there is a relationship that forms. I've seen representatives from this organization on my campus. Maybe it's a bridge, right? And lets them know that if they do have a concern and want to speak with someone or need to seek help and don't want to do it on campus, they can do it off campus. So it sort of expands the resources that we offer our students, you know, to include, you know, other partners who are off campus that they may not have been aware of, and that, you know, they get to also see maybe the range of services that those partners provide.
Yeah, and I really like, you know, how you're pointing out, Kevin, like some of the different wants and needs that students may have. Like, I know I'm here at this institution, whether it be online or in person, but I kind of would rather talk to somebody who is not part of the institution, right? And it makes me think about, you know, the University Assault Services Knowledge You Ask resource that Men Can Stop Rape has created that does consolidate some of those things. So here are the things that you've got on campus, and here are the things that are not on campus, and here's some of the things for, you know, if you want to do confidential reporting, or if you don't want to report, you just want to talk to somebody about what your options are, you know, all those different things. It's a placeholder for some of those things.
Can I just throw in one more thing related to what you're saying? We, in addition to, you know, that trying to form partnerships with organizations in our local community, so in DC, you know, one of the things we did once the campus shut down, we went into quarantine. We took some of the resources that we created for study abroad programs and other sort of travel programs that we have, where we had provided students lists of local, national, and international resources, right? That the resources they could access if they were in another country studying abroad or in another state, right? And so we sort of took some of that and created a sort of like a handout, something they could download from our website that said, you know, you're studying at home, wherever you are, whether you are anywhere across the United States or even in another country, these are national and international resources that you can reach out to if you have a question or a concern, in addition to the campus resources that are still available to you. So even trying to put people in touch with their local resources, you know, not necessarily in the DC area, but wherever they may be, is something that we thought was important to do.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kevin. Charlotte, so we're just about at time, so I want to pass it to you to close us out. So is there anything you want to add to? Yeah, no pressure, right? Is there anything you want to add to kind of where we're going with this conversation as we draw to a close here?
Sure, I can reiterate that I think it's also super important to give people other options off campus because of different feelings of safety and trust with campus offices and institutions. And on more theoretical level, I think it's important for us to model collaboration, community building, incorporating different perspectives and nuance into our conversations by using community organizations and other folks as a part of an integral part of those conversations. I think sometimes students get to the point where they say, that's my office staff member. I know what you're going to say. I know what to expect. But when we incorporate those different perspectives, really share the power in how we're talking about these things, not make it consent from an academic philosophical view completely separated from how our office talks about it, really make it holistic and connected by using professors, by using community organizations in these conversations. I think we can come together more as a community and create those connections for our students.
So again, Charlotte, I'm just really appreciative of how before you were transitioning us, you were the ramp, and now you've tied us full circle. It's some of the things that we were talking about earlier, especially I'm thinking of what Aaron was saying with like, it's not just the trainings for, one part of the population, it's for the entire community, especially, and I was thinking how professors and how, different departments can play a collaborative role in shaping this holistic community building kind of a conversation that you're talking about, Charlotte. So I just appreciate that again. And so we're a little over 3 o'clock now. So I just want to thank you all so much for being here, for being part of this conversation, and for leading in such significant ways. And so as we wrap up, is there any last things, any resources you want to share, anything you want to plug, or any last comment that you'd like to make before we hop off?
Thank you for bringing us together and for allowing us to have, a deep conversation like this. Thank you. Thank you for moderating, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. And thank you, everybody else, too.
Yeah.
And thank you just for providing this forum, because I think it just during this time when, again, most of us have been working and learning from home, it is a way to keep us all together and talking about these issues and thinking through sort of how we are going to continue to do this work and building these communities going forward.
Well, thank you all again. Until the next time, it was such a pleasure to see all of you and speak with you today. Take care.